What's up, my friends? Welcome to this episode of the Wholehealth with Rob Carney Podcast. And on this episode, we have our guest, Nathan Kohlerman. So Nathan is a human optimization and psycho-spiritual transformation coach. So he's coached, facilitated, and trained professional athletes from the NFL, the PGA, soldiers in the U.S. Army, men's groups, and other coaches to overcome mental, emotional, and physical blocks. So he incorporates methods and modalities such as breathwork, gateway heart healing, meditation, movement, neurolinguistic programming, psychedelic integration, and quantum healing. So here, Nathan and I just have a really great conversation. This dude has really been through a lot. He has a lot of great experience that he's come to share with the world. And he's just a really down-to-earth dude. And as I said, we really dive into things like the self, the source, and society. And at the end, we do a little rapid-fire question action, which he has some great answers to. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this conversation. Without further ado, Nathan Kohlerman, welcome to the show.
What is going on, brother? Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Absolutely. So Nathan, as we just introduced you, you've got quite the arsenal of tools at your disposal. You've had a really cool experience in both professional and every other aspect of your life. So I'd love for you to share your story. Where did things start for you in terms of the major shifts in your life? Take us back and bring us to present moment.
Awesome, brother. I'm happy to share. Yeah. So growing up, I was always an athlete. I started mixed martial arts when I was 5 years old with American Kempo, and progressively moved into jiu-jitsu and a little bit of Muay Thai and judo, and that was really where I found peace. Was ironically through fighting. And growing up, I didn't really have a lot of friends. I felt alone for a good majority of my life. I didn't grow up in the most peaceful of households, to say the least. And fitting in and being a part of something greater than myself was unfamiliar to me. I didn't really understand or know really what a family was, or what a community was, or really what real human connection was. And I didn't understand for a long time why I was the way that I was, and why I didn't feel normal, and why I didn't feel as though I had much of a purpose. So from the earliest times on, I remember being in therapy at around 7 or 8 years old, shortly after I had attempted to commit suicide and swallowed a bottle of pills, as a kid. And just being able to put that together, reflecting back on it, is really quite interesting. And just kind of seeing how trauma and how chaos really started showing up and manifesting itself, and how I was, seeking ways to soothe, but never really had the tools. So, fast forward to high school, went through this huge transformation, started making friends. And, that was around my parents' divorce as well. So, being a part of sports, I had an outlet, but when I didn't have those outlets, the experience in the training that I had with fighting was channeled outwardly to a lot of other people, unfortunately. And it got to a point where I had gotten mixed up with a crowd, and what most would call a gang or a crew, or whatever label you want to put on it, but essentially it was just organized crime and violence. And that put me on a path of destruction, whether it was through drugs, anywhere ranging from cocaine to MDMA to speed to eventually heroin, where that was really where my life hit rock bottom. And I was at a turning point in my life when my mom and my sister sat me down around winter break in 2009. And they essentially told me that if I didn't change what I was doing with my life, then I would wind up dead or in prison. So went to school the week after winter break, and the recruiters were standing on the front door. So I enlisted in the U.S. Army. I got sober. I served for 5.5 years honorably. And throughout that time, I was medically discharged for bilateral compartment syndrome, which is essentially a myofascial disorder where essentially it was like shin splints on steroids, and I couldn't run very far. So again, in the military, if you can't run, you can't fight. So, they chose to discharge me, and I immediately pursued a career in fitness. finding fitness as my main outlet in the military. When I started, my fitness journey in 2011, when I was 19 years old, it always, felt very home to me. It was the closest thing that I had, physically to martial arts. And I went down the path of bodybuilding, powerlifting, until I went through a pretty traumatic hand injury in 2017, March 2017 to be specific. And my entire life changed. I found out I had severe liver toxicity and acute kidney injury. I was 253 pounds. I couldn't sit on the ground and play with my daughter. And I was miserable, not only just physically, but mentally, emotionally. I was not sound. I was not okay. I was masking years of pain and years of trauma through this physical appearance, this persona, and this image of what I thought everybody wanted to see rather than who I really was. And essentially, when I leaned on that granite counter and it snapped off and tore my hand open, it actually tore my soul open. And when that had happened, I started looking at myself from a very realistic and objective lens and seeing that something needed to change. So as I started my physical healing journey, I also started my mental, emotional, and spiritual healing journey as well. And fast forwarding to now, I've found movement as a primary medicine of mine, something that really taught me and showed me a different way of being. It allowed me the space to create. It showed me a way to tap into my emotions and being able to move and express myself, which then opened, my ability to use my voice. It opened the ability to use my voice, I should say. And throughout this time, I had stumbled upon a lot of different methods and modalities, including, breathwork and gateway heart healing and psychedelics, meditation, and finding different ways of being, through the creative lens of my mind, and being able to tap into these, subconscious and unconscious parts of me that allowed me to see the potentiality of what we can do in this finite human existence that we have. So now being able to share what not only I've experienced, but what I've educated myself in to help others heal and really break through these limitations and reestablish their purpose in life has propelled me on this path to help others discover their true calling, and to help them optimize their mind, their body, and reconnect to the divine.
I love that. That is a great story. So thank you for sharing that. And, a few things you touched on that I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into. You mentioned connection and community. And I think that especially in this year of 2020, where we're being told to isolate, to avoid community, avoid connection, it's made me realize just how essential community and connection is. So as much as I don't like a lot of what's happened this year and the way it's been handled in many regards, it's made me really recognize how grateful I am for the connections, the communities I do have in my life, and has actually brought me closer with a lot of these people. So I love to hear, on your journey of self-healing, how did community and connection play a part in that?
Yeah, 100%. I kind of trace it back to my addiction. The root catalyst of addiction is disconnection. Rather, whether it be disconnection from self, disconnection from source, disconnection from society. We see how disconnected we become and seeking connection through something outside of ourselves. So the first real feeling of connection and community I had was sports, but I never felt, again, part of the team, right? And a lot of that was driven by ego, and I had my own selfish agenda for wanting to do sports. And then I went into the military, and essentially when I got sober, that community was absolutely essential to where I felt as though I had a purpose. That purpose I actually chose, right? I got to choose my MOS. I got to choose what I wanted to do, how I wanted to serve, and throughout that time, they were giving me additional duties, additional responsibilities. And, as I started climbing the ranks, I started becoming more responsible for other people as well. Being a sergeant and non-commissioned officer, I was essentially in charge of other people's lives as well. And that gave me a completely different outlook on everything, is actually being a leader, right? And knowing that I could lead others has helped me transition into more being a leader in the fitness industry or the community here locally in Arizona. And, you had mentioned quarantine, and that was such a huge thing, because that's really when I feel like I found my community, having to move everything virtual, not being able to work out of gyms or anything else. I built a very strong community just through Facebook. And those connection calls really did get me through a lot of tough times. And I realized in that moment, on that first connection call, that, I wanted something greater, right? And I started looking at the world and what needed to be done. And that's when I heavily invested myself into men's work. And that's when I found, the modern Renaissance man. And that was my first introduction to men's work. And diving deeper and digging deeper, I found Sacred Sons. And through Sacred Sons, I started understanding and realizing that the embodiment of a man itself can create a community of other like-minded men around him. And that's when I decided to start the House of Omega, which is essentially virtual at this point, but now something that I can bring and share my medicine with communities that do want to experience, that special forces meet spirituality feeling. And, even now these connection calls that we have, every 2 weeks are just as important to me as it is to them. And being able to not only build a community, but to be a part of a community and to be the catalyst of the community itself has been really what's helped me stay rooted in my purpose. And that's really what it comes down to, is the community and the connection reaffirms and reestablishes that root purpose and that root driver for, why I'm here on this earth, why I'm here in this lifetime. And it brings about infinite possibilities of what I can create and what I can leave behind that's greater than my own agenda, that is.
I love that. And I can totally relate. I mean, myself and two of my friends, we started Ice and Iron out here in the Boston area, which is a monthly wellness group, and it actually started as strictly for men. But then as quarantine happened, we recognized there's a lot of women out there that are seeking community. And we're like, who are we to say that they can't come? So now that things are starting to settle a little bit, now we're doing one men's and one co-ed every month. And that has just been essential, is the only word that I can use, for my own sanity, my own health, my own well-being. And I'd love to hear, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening right now that are dealing with things like addictions, dealing with mental health challenges. And I'd love to hear from your perspective as someone who's conquered that. What would you say to these people? Because obviously right now, I know a handful of people that if they were a little bit further back in their journey and their mental health, they may not be here right now. Had this lockdown happened and they were forced to be in isolation, they had these addictions, they had these depressions, these suicidal thoughts. If they weren't farther along their development, I truly believe they wouldn't be here because they'd be so isolated. So I'd love to hear a message that you could share with people of just some tools that you utilize to help you conquer that addiction and that, really become more grounded in yourself.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. So, like I said, with addiction, the primary catalyst of addiction is disconnection from self, source, and society. So if we can break that down into 3 different segments, right? Disconnection from self. And more so, rather than something that I've done, I would rather offer a prompt, right? What part of me is seeking something outside of me, right? What part of me needs to be healed or wants to be healed or is crying out for help that I need to address, or maybe that I've been suppressing, or maybe that I've been, pushing to the back burner because I'm trying to always seek something that is outside of me, that is the next best thing, rather than just being able to sit with myself and be okay with myself and really truly honor and love the side and the part of me that wants this attention so badly. And that would be the first thing. And whether that's done through meditation, whether that's done through somatic release breath work, whether that's done through movement, whoever might need one of those tools, whatever fits that puzzle piece for them, it is an individualized roadmap to recovery, and that is the issue that I see with addiction, is this one size fits all method. And I should say Western methodology in general. You look at Western medicine and you start looking at the symptoms and the signs that people are experiencing, and it's this one pill that's going to create, this one solution, but it has these 20 different byproducts and problems that come with it, right? And that is the issue, is when we start to give this, one size fits all method, it loses the individualization, just like an exercise program. You can't go on bodybuilding.com or something like that and get a workout program by Jay Cutler or Steve Cook or any of these guys who have these amazing bodies and expect to have the same desired results. It doesn't work that way. Every single person is different. The physiology, the psychology, every aspect of a human being is different. So really looking at the self first and understanding what that individualized roadmap looks for them is where I would start. And then looking at source and society, right? Where is my connection to the higher power, right? Do I have this connection to the higher power? If you don't have a connection to a higher power, again, that's your choice. That's your preference. There's nothing wrong with that, but it could be an implied cause to what that is actually causing. And then there's society, right? A lot of people who feel alone, when we find things outside of us that make us feel better, it's because we don't have anything else that we truly feel inspired to connect with, right? So seeking a community, seeking a support group, right? Those are absolutely essential for getting through these, and just knowing that you're never alone. You're never alone. And that is that comes back to source, right? If we have a belief in a higher power, we know that we're never alone and that everything has a divine purpose with divine timing. So if we can establish those three pillars of self, source, and society, we can help, come out of these destructive patterns and these addictions that don't or no longer serve us anymore.
I really like that. Self, source, and society. I've never really thought of it that way, but I really like that trifecta, those three pillars. And I think it really, it's similar to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Paul Chek's work, but he talks about I, we, all. Focus on the I, then the we, and then the all. But, and that's, I think, a big challenge with a lot of what are called leaders nowadays, are people who are, have no connection with themselves, and they're just so focused on being in control of the all, but they have no connection with the I or the we. And I think that it's the same thing, the self, source, and society is you have to have the balance of all three. Because if you're missing one piece, you're out of balance. And like you said, a lot of times, in the past, you mentioned your ego as related to sports and some other aspects. I think that's also part of ourselves that we need to embody and embrace. I think there's a lot of people out there that say the ego is bad, the ego is bad, but the ego is there to protect us. If we can learn to find peace with that ego within ourselves, that's just a piece of us. It doesn't have to be the main driver. It could be the passenger. And, sometimes even at this point in my life where I feel like I've done a lot of work to find that balance in my ego, sometimes the ego kicks the other driver out and takes the driver's seat. And it's just a matter of recognizing that, having that self-awareness and being, hold on, ego, you got to get back to the back seat because, you're causing a little harm here. So, with that being said, I know that there's also a lot of us have an addiction to our own thoughts. So I'd love to hear, obviously, how we think is going to create our reality. So I'd love to hear on your journey, how your own thoughts, how you had to reprogram your own brain in order to be in the place where you are now.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful, beautiful way of putting it is the driver analogy. And it's one that I use quite frequently. And, again, that ego having that passenger seat, not saying it always has to go in the back seat, but that passenger seat, I see it having two different options. It either has the roadmap, and it'll give you a guiding point and a guiding reference on what roads are available and which ones you can take, right? But it's kind of like that student driver car where it has the steering wheel. And if you start to take a turn that it doesn't want, it's going to try to jerk you in the wrong other direction. But at the end of the day, you still have ultimate control in that driver's seat, right? That's the analogy I like to give, because anytime we put it in the back seat, it's kind of like the kid who's been being bad.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Billy, get in the back. But yeah, to your question though, with the thoughts and changing and reprogramming the way we're thinking about things, one thing that I say is the most powerful tool was just that self-dialogue, because when we fall into these addictive patterns, or, when I was using heroin, or if I was watching porn, or if I was just going out and trying to find another girl for another night and another night and another night, just trying to fill this empty void within myself, the aftermath of that was shame. I'm shameful and I'm guilty because I keep doing this thing, even though I know it's not good for me, but I don't quite know what's going on. So what could be going on? And, what is it within me that, right? And that just starts to spiral. And what I found, being where I'm at now, is the more tools that I acquired and the more understanding that I had, my ego started developing a conscious of its own in order to keep up with me, So I still have these thoughts, right? And I still break down my psychology into these archetypes, and I go down this psychoanalytical process where I start extracting everything and retracing everything. And a lot of the times it doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us to go down that hole. So the greatest thing that I could ever do is, rather than feeding into the thoughts, right? It's what Sam Harris talks about in his meditation practice, is finding the thinker behind the thought and looking at it from the place of the field of consciousness rather than the point of consciousness, right? Instead of standing in that one point, standing in the field of it, feeling all of it, feeling it fully, without having to analyze it or understand it or rationalize it, but feeling into it fully, and then being able to identify what part of me is creating this reality. And now that I've identified what part of me is creating this reality, can I honor it? Can I acknowledge it? Can I love it? Can I forgive it? And can I move through this process in a more gentle manner rather than this self-destructive, shameful, guilt-driven process that doesn't really serve it either? Because like you said, the ego is our best friend. Our ego can be our helper on this journey. And if we keep on slapping the ego in the face, it's going to punch us back. It's like a rabid dog, right? If you have a really pissed off dog who's had years and years and years of abuse, you don't abuse the dog even more to make it right. You show it love, you show it compassion, you show it grace. Sure, you keep it on a leash just to make sure that it doesn't bite anybody else that comes near the house, but you're still going out, you're still feeding the dog, you're still caring for it, you're still watering the dog, you're still grooming it and washing it and making sure that it's loved and cared for. And over time, it becomes less aggressive and less aggressive and less aggressive, right? It's the same thing. So if we can start approaching it from that lens and just knowing that these are just subconscious, patterns that are derived from whether it be childhood or family systems, belief systems, social structures, we can start seeing how this ego, which is actually in fact our personality, how our personality started to develop. And then we can love and have compassion for that. And once we do that, we can have love and compassion for ourselves. That is at least my interpretation and opinion on the ultimate practice of self-love.
I love that. And I love the dog analogy, because the way I always like to describe people, before I get to that, I want to say that the tools is, I think that's really, in all my coaching, it's just adding tools to people's toolbox. Like you said, there's no one tool. There's not a master tool. There's not a skeleton key for everything. It's like you're not going to use a wrench to hammer something in. You're going to use a hammer. And so for me in my coaching, it's always just giving people tools and say, hey, look, I'm going to teach you about meditation. I'm going to teach you about Tai Chi. I'm going to teach you about journaling. I'm going to teach you about breathwork. I'm going to talk cold therapy. You're not going to use all these tools every single day. You don't have to do all these tools every single day. It's learning when to use these tools appropriately. And coming back to the dog analogy, I think that that's a great way. Is I always say, and whenever we're having questions about ourselves as human beings, look at nature. How does nature work? Because we tend to think of ourselves as separate from nature, but we're still a part of nature. Just because we have this whole consciousness thing doesn't mean that we're way above nature. We still need these trees to create oxygen for us. We still need the soil to provide food for us. And so, like you said with the dog, when we're looking at nature, especially here in New England right now, where the leaves are all dead, it's cold outside, things are dying. But that's just a cycle of nature. Nature's not complaining that it's cold outside. Nature's not complaining that all its leaves fell off. It's just taking it as it goes, and it's accepting all that is and making the most of that situation. It's using the resources available to use its energy to grow. And right now in winter, it's not growing up, it's growing down, it's planting the roots. And sometimes it's important that to recognize that time isn't as linear as we think it is. Sometimes we think that we're on this path, we just got to keep going this way, but no, sometimes we go down, sometimes we go up, and those ups and downs are normal, they're natural. And again, when we look at nature, we recognize that. And the times that are down, that's not time to be sprouting our branches. That's time to be growing our roots deeper. And I think that that's a really important aspect for people to recognize, especially as you get into this personal development journey, is that I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, I did this shadow work, I did this, and now it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies. It's like, no, you're still going to have some really freaking hard days, and that are going to suck. And it happens a lot less and less the more you do the work, and the depths get a little bit less deep, but there are always going to be ups and downs. I think that that's something that, in a society where we have air conditioned home, we have air conditioned cars, where our resilience isn't as strong as it used to be. And that's where I love doing tools like cold exposure, things like exercise, you mentioned, things like saunas, things that are causing that hormetic stress on our body to build that resilience. And I'm sure, as someone who is in the military, you put your body under a lot of stress. Someone who's done a lot of exercise, a lot about putting your body on stress, but we grow stronger from that. So I'd love to hear some of the practices that you use in your life to build up some of that resilience that I think we, as a society, as a human race, so desperately need right now.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I love all that, man. And the analogy with nature is just so beautiful. That's something that's more so been more recent in my life, is the deep appreciation for nature, which I actually found through psychedelics. That being one of the primary tools that I use.
Yeah, feel free to dive into that story. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I was definitely about to. That being one of the primary tools, to build my resiliency, to enhance my awareness, to really find a deeper appreciation for the medicine that's available, right? And what nature is capable of building. And through my experiences, just on my first mushroom journey, I remember sitting underneath this tree. I call it the Tree of Eden. It's a tree that was across from my old apartment. And I was sitting under the tree, and the way the grass was moving, it was breathing, and I could really see and understand that everything around me was alive in that moment. And, one thing that I frequently do with my mushroom journey is that I'll look at the clouds, and it really brings me to a place of oneness with nature, and knowing that I, as a human, have the same power nature does in terms of creation. Because I can look at the clouds, and I start creating anything I want, right? Anything that I want. And let's say there's this like shadowy, demony thing now reaching for me, and then I look and I can start understanding that what within me is now creating this, right? What is this lesson starting to teach me, right? And now what can I use from nature to help me develop and learn different aspects of myself? And that's just one example. The other one being, when I was out in the desert and, I sat with Changa. For those who don't know what Changa is, it's DMT. And I was on this boulder, right, with like 3 other men, right? So it was during a men's retreat. And I was looking down on the rock, and it had this really beautiful just articulation of what looked like veins. And to see the rocks and the boulders that had veins, and to see that there was energy coursing through them, really helped me understand as well that same energy courses through my veins, right? And it's this deep connection and deep appreciation for nature that was exposed through plant medicine, right? And knowing that as I ingested that plant medicine, inhaled that plant medicine, and it became one with me, I became one with the earth. And it brought about this big circular thing for me where, I've been learning about quantum healing during this time, and how the entanglement aspect of how we are all connected comes into play, and it solidified all that for me. So plant medicine being one of them, and the other one that I just mentioned was quantum healing, and looking at the quantum timeline and looking at the the approach that we use, right? And how time repeats itself, and how different phases of our lives are in fact different leaps through different possibilities in different realms, to where it may sound crazy for some, but when you look at it for what it is, and when you trust in it, right, it works out. But now you can actually go back through your timeline and heal very deep things that may not have even belonged to you, things that may have came from generations and lineages and lifetimes. And you can start seeing the span of time. And like you said earlier, it's not linear at all, right? And through quantum healing and through different aspects and teachings that I've learned, I've realized nothing is linear. Nothing is linear. And having the understanding that nothing is linear created now this understanding within me. And we start looking at the heart, right? We start looking at the electromagnetic frequencies that the heart gives off and the earth gives off. And we can start seeing how the heartbeat looks on an EKG, right? It's never a flat line. You're dead when it's a flat line. It's constantly going up, constantly going down. It's constantly oscillating, like you had said before. And that constant oscillation helped me understand that everything is always moving, everything is always in motion. And that's where movement has been, again, the primary catalyst to all these things that I found. And probably the most powerful practice that I've ever found was breathwork, and that in its own has more power than anyone or anything could ever imagine, and for those who have done breath work, they know how powerful it really is. And there's so many different types of breath work, whether it's irregular breathing or holotropic breathing, alternate nostril breathing, breath of fire. You can go on and on and on and on and on about how many different strategies there are. But that just goes to show that there are infinite possibilities to expand your realm of consciousness, your field of consciousness, as I mentioned before. And still, the most powerful breath work that I've ever done is holotropic breathing. Holotropic breathing is actually a breathing technique that I use with my clients with gateway heart healing. And it's 45 minutes consecutively nonstop. And being able to go.
And that's a lot. For anyone who's never done, that's a lot. That's a lot of time for breath work.
Dude, and it's a whole, it is a completely different experience. Like I can tell you at that last inhale and at that breath hold at the top, dude, I've held my breath for almost 10 minutes there. And I've just gone on this deep, deep, deep journey. And when that exhale comes, it's like being on a ketamine journey, right? To where my body just dissolves into the universe. But then it's the only time I really see visuals, right? Is when I'm in that place, right? Because I don't see a lot of visuals, or I'm not very good with visualization during meditations or hypnotherapy. I've even tried. I have a really hard time with imagery and visualizations. Also with dreaming, I don't have a lot of lucid dreams, for a very long time. And I think it could be very linked to suppressed trauma, for sure. And that is the time in which I start having visualizations and colors, and I can start seeing more vividly. And if I do it at night, I start to have more dreams, right? So it is a way to unlock those things that may not have been available to me before. So with all those tools combined, it's just been a process for me personally. And they've been powerful. They've been absolutely powerful, because every single time I go into one of these practices, there's a different lesson to be learned. And I'm always open to new practices but I'm never really attached to one certain practice in particular.
I love that. Yeah, one of my mantras I aim to live by is to be open to everything and attached to nothing, and just really allow things to come as they may. And I can have my favorite practices, but being completely open that if someone shows me something better, again, letting the ego be like, it's not about my thing, it's about what's better for me. And I think that that's been a really key piece of my philosophies over the past year, is just reminding myself, open to everything, attached to nothing. And as new tools come in, some old ones cycle out, and things are kind of just constantly overturning. There's some things that stay for a few years, some that only stay for a week. And it's just this constant overturning and adding and changing of the toolbox, sharpening the tools. And I love that you mentioned the psychedelics or the plant medicines in general. I love that you mentioned, movement, and I love that you mentioned breath work. And for me, I did my first mushroom experience when I was 17, my senior year of high school. I remember it was my April break of senior year of high school, and that was kind of an eye-opening experience to me. I had actually, at that point, almost enrolled into the military myself, and I ended up doing my senior internship with the fire department, and ended up being an on-call firefighter for about three and a half years, and started off with the Air Force ROTC my first semester of college. But after doing that mushroom journey, and I remember then I did another one as I was in the ROTC program, and it was kind of telling me, this is not the path for you. This is not where you're supposed to be. And my ego was wanting to be this military guy. I thought that there was some prestige around that, and there is. But my ego was the one telling me. And then in the plant medicines really allowed me to, break out of that and recognize that that wasn't for me. And I've told this story on I think a previous podcast, but I used to have recurring dreams of myself dying at about, I think it was 23 years old. And that would have been, I was going to do active duty. It would have been 5 years active, 2 years reserve out of the RTC program. And I remember seeing myself dying at 23 years old. And the day that I went to my colonel and said that I was not doing the program anymore, that evening I had to dream myself as an old man. So I was convinced at that point, I'd accepted that I was going to die young. I was like, this is just my journey. And then after doing some of these plant medicines and having that dream, I remember waking up crying, like, holy shit, I just made the best decision of my life. And it was crazy to me that, like you said, it's hard to explain some of these plant medicine journeys, because as someone who's never done it, you kind of sound like a crazy person. It's kind of like, what the hell do you mean the grass is breathing? What do you mean the rocks are having energy? Like, what do you like? You're on drugs. Like that's the easy answer. People say you're on drugs, and I love that you're cracking up because I've tried to explain this to some people. It's just like they don't. You can't explain it with words. It's something that, in my opinion, needs to be felt. And you can hear all the stories you want, but it's not until that you dive into it for yourself that you really recognize, like you said, just how everything is connected. And going outside, for me, there was a phase where I was learning about crystals, and part of me was kind of like, is this bullshit? Like, is this just some hippie shit that people are saying crystals have all this power? And then as I became more connected with nature, and I've actually got a nice stone here that was gifted by my girlfriend to me recently, and there we go, let's go. So, and then it's just something that whether you believe in it or not, if you I enjoy having them around me. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me that I'm connected with nature. So at the very least, you can believe that or not. But I find that practices like going out in nature, for me, going for a walk every day is just it's an essential piece of my day. And kind of my non-negotiables are movement and walking. And movement being more of an exercise or a Tai Chi practice, whether it's a rest day or an active day. But even today and a lot of days, I try to sit down to start working, and my body just needs to exercise first. I love to exercise in the morning, and then once I have that, my body is now happy, and then my mind is happy. And again, everything's connected. So when one is taken care of, the other one's connected. And with that being said, I just think that using a lot of these tools that you shared about, the breath work is another one that it's something that, just like the psychedelics, until you're experiencing it for yourself, it's kind of like there's no way that just breathing can do that. I breathe every day. I don't experience that. It's like, well, most people are breathing in their mouth very shallowly in their chest, kind of in that fight or flight response. And it's like, yeah, you're probably not going to be feeling that. But if you go a little bit deeper, if you build those roots, you really get down to the core of what's in your body. Like you said, I've had some crazy experience with breath work too. And sometimes it does take getting past like 10 minutes. Sometimes the first 10 minutes, especially as you start to build up, a resilience to that, sometimes it takes me 10, 15 minutes to really get into that deeper state. But then once you do, like you said, it could be a game changer.
Dude, yeah. I mean, you're totally right. Like, words do not do these things justice. They really don't. And a lot of that is also dependent on like individual experience. that like individualized roadmap is everyone has a different experience. The dimethyltryptamine, the DMT that's released from my brain during breath work is going to have a different reaction than your brain does, right? And that's why, these are spiritual based practices. Spirituality by my definition is the process of going inward of oneself. Again, having an individualized roadmap to the recovery of whatever it is you need to heal from, and that is the root, right? Getting to the root of who you are, what you are, how you serve, as Paul Selig says, and the guides of Paul Selig, I should say, and being able to really go in as deeply as possibly as you can. So then during the season change, once the trees start blooming, you can take what you've built with your roots and then share it and express it and show it to the world. And those are your leaves, right? That is why we have these practices, so that way we can dig our roots as deep as we possibly can to extract as much nutrition and as much life that we can from the earth, to then go out in the world and share what we have, share our medicine, share our gifts, share our service, our acts of service, right? And what that can do for the collective.
100%. I love that. And I'm feeling a calling up here right now that I want to do a rapid fire question. This is coming to me as in the moment here. So I'd love to just ask some rapid fire questions and get your responses. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Favorite animal?
Gorilla.
Yes. That's my top 3. Favorite color?
Purple.
Purple. All right, cool. Favorite state in the US?
The state?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm actually conflicted here.
Or if you got 2, you can say 2 or 3.
Texas.
What'd you say?
I have to say Texas.
Texas. All right, cool. Favorite country outside the US?
Ooh, this is a good one. I am only going to speak on the ones that I've been to. But I would have to say Indonesia, man. I went to Bali, and that place is just absolutely magical.
Awesome. All right, let's see. What would you say if you could go to one place in the world right now alone for 2 weeks? Where would you go?
Amsterdam.
All right. Let's say, all right, so now you can have 5 friends come with you anywhere in the world. Where would you go?
Ooh. Trying to think, there's a lot of places, but honestly, 5 friends, Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Yeah, build a nice little commune.
Nice. Well, let's go into that. All right, so if you're going to go off grid with a small group of people, where in the world would that be?
I would honestly just get in a plane, pick one random island, and just go there.
I dig it.
No place. I wouldn't even know where I'm at. So
there you go. All right, let's see. If you could be a professional athlete, what sport would you be?
Mixed martial artist.
Martial artist. Okay. Let's see. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
All right. And let's do one more. Think of one more good one. If you won the lottery today, let's call it $100 million, what would you do? Or what would you buy? Or what would you anything?
I would do 2 things. I would build 2 separate nonprofits, 2 separate foundations, 2 separate centers for addiction recovery, and a human optimization center all in one. So giving everybody the tools that they would need for their individualized roadmap to recovery, fully staffed, fully paid for, fully funded for as long as it needs to be. And then the other one would be a troubled youth foundation, whether that be younger men, younger women who are involved in, the not so peaceful communities, who have, struggled through addiction or abuse or anything like that, but just somewhere where the underprivileged and, troubled youth have somewhere to go, somewhere to feel safe, and actually have mentors and things that are available to them where they can come and find peace. And If that has a resident option where I can house them if they're in unsafe environments, 100%. That is exactly what I would do. And I would leave these things literally all over the country. I would take these and I would build them all over the country, at least one in every single time zone, just so that way there was a place where people could go. And the rest of that I would leave for the rest of my generation. So that way they were always taken care of and they can create impact in that way, in their method, in the way they want.
I love it. That's a beautiful answer. And so with that being said, let's transition to what you're doing right now, what the plans are for 2021, how people can connect with you, learn more about you, and, get involved with some of the cool stuff you're doing.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'd love to share. So what I'm doing now, I am building community. I am really feeling into everything that is happening right now in the world. I'm really taking some actual time to downregulate, to really prepare for this next year, to where I'm not working as much. I'm not serving as much. I'm really serving myself more than anything right now, to be perfectly honest. And, some things that I'm building right now is a 6-month transformation program for men and women. Like you said, with the fire, with the fire in the ice, right? Is that, there are a lot of women who also need help. I do love working with men, and there is a space for that, which I'll cover in a minute. But, really opening this for men and women to come in together, to heal collectively, to transform over, a 6-month period starting.
Will that be online or in person for people who are curious?
Yeah, so that'll be an online program. Starts January 11th, and we're going to be going 6 months. And that is going to cover everything from the mastery of self to the mastery of the mind to the optimization of the body and to the calibration and balancing of masculine and feminine energies. And, I am providing a 6-month personal training program to also help them optimize their bodies and movement. And they can really have a one-stop shop for everything that they may need in their transformation journey. And, another thing that I have been working on, I should say, has been, everything that I'm doing with men in the House of Omega. So still building that community. And we are having a men's retreat first week of March in Austin, Texas. So there'll be more details to follow on that as well. And those are my 2 primary areas of focus. The tertiary focus that I have right now is coaching and helping people prepare and integrate psychedelic experiences. Being a self-proclaimed psycho-spiritual addiction recovery and psychedelic integration coach. I say self-proclaimed because it's not accredited, and I have done extensive training to have the tools necessary to help people on these journeys. But it's something I feel very called to is helping people, start their journey, right? And making sure that it's done properly and with reverence and with proper preparation and integration. So that way, people can start to heal using some of the tools that I've discovered that have helped me remove unwanted patterns and behaviors, also known as addictions, and being able to see the greater field of consciousness that they may not, right? And that is something I'm very passionate about, is really sharing the medicine with people, and with respect and with love, really. So that way people know that they have something they can use, right? And maybe they don't need that, medication anymore. Maybe they don't need to go to therapy anymore. If things aren't working for them, then, giving them something more alternative, giving them something more of a holistic path to finding, what they're really seeking.
Wow, I love all that. That sounds like a great transformation that I'm really excited for people to embark on with you. So if someone wants to learn more, connect with you, website, Instagram, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, man. So everybody can pretty much find me on any social platform, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at Nathan Kohlerman. And then they can check out my website, which is going to be redone, which is going to expose a lot of these things. So it's www.newintention.com. It's NEU, intention. And then for any of the men that are listening, or the women who are listening that want to, share this with a man, they can check out the men's work at houseofomega.com, which is HAUS of omega.com.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, I really appreciate you being here today. I'm looking forward to the future when we do a retreat together. I know that's going to happen. Not sure when, but I know that's in the cards. So thank you for being here, brother. Appreciate you sharing your story, sharing your message, sharing your wisdom. And anyone who didn't catch his website, his social media, I'm going to put that link in the description box here. So check out Nathan's stuff. Nathan, thank you for being you, my friend.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you, brother. So many blessings.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you for everyone for listening. Peace out. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney Podcast with our guest, Nathan Kohlerman. So if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate you checking out Nathan's stuff. As you've seen and heard, he is up to a lot of great things that this world so desperately needs. So follow him on all the platforms he mentioned. And if you really like this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friend, family member, or anyone you think that could benefit from listening to this. It would really help with the channel here if you could share this, like, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. That really allows us to reach more people. And as you can see with people like Nathan, there are a lot of people on this world that really have great messages to share. And it's my goal with this podcasting platform to really amplify the voices of these people that have these messages that can really fundamentally shift the direction of our world. So, with that being said, another way to really support the podcast, if you enjoy the conversations here, is by supporting us with our sponsors. So, as always, we have our Purium Superfoods, organic non-GMO superfoods, which you can save $50 with a discount code NUTRITION at checkout. So, you use the discount code NUTRITION, you'll save $50 off of your order of $75 or more. And if you really find some great things out there, like the Daily Core 4 is a great one to go into if you're looking for more of a detox, a cleanse. The Ultimate Lifestyle Transformation is great, and you'll actually end up saving 25%. So that discount code NUTRITION saves you $50 or 25%, whatever the greater savings is to you. Then we also have the brand new Mushroom Revival rebrand. So Mushroom Revival recently did a rebrand. They've got all new packaging, new logo, new formulas, but still the great magic mushrooms in there. So they added a few different herbs, which I am a huge fan of, having a mixture of herbs and mushrooms. So I'd love for you to check them out. MushroomRevival.com. Use the discount code wholehealth and you'll save 15% on every single order. And if you see their bundles there, they got a 3-pack, they got a 6-pack, which can save you an additional 10 to 15%, I believe it is, respectively. So check them out. And, we've got a bunch of others. Bioptimizer with Masszymes, Magnesium, P3OM, so many good things for our digestive system, for our rest and recovery. And again, Whole Health, save 10% every single order, every time. So check those out, wholehealthconnects.com. We got the BioLight for red light therapy. Save 10% off your red light therapy device. Discount code wholehealth. Aries Tech EMF transforming chips. Discount code wholehealth. Save 10%. There's a little theme here going on with the discount code wholehealth. So check all those out. Would really love you sharing. Would love to hear your feedback when you try some of these superfoods. Trying some of the red light therapy. Been getting a lot of good feedback on the red light therapy specifically lately as we enter these winter months. The grocery stores are packed, so superfoods are a great thing to stock up on this time of year as well. So as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your support. Let's keep making this world a better place for all living beings. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.